Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the podcast Rise and Tell with Sheekha. Today, I have a brilliant guest on our show, Dr. Albert Bramante. He is a seasoned talent agent with more than 2 decades of experience in the entertainment industry. He holds a PhD in psychology, and he's also an author. He's also a certified hypnotist and an NLP practitioner. He brings a unique blend of psychological insight and practical expertise to his work. I learned a lot. You know what's the biggest thing that I learned from this episode? Is to take action and to dare to come out of the comfort zone. Dr. Albert had a lot of tips and suggestions for us, especially when it comes to self-doubt, self-sabotaging, self-esteem, and we also discussed what is toxic high self-esteem. So let's just get started. All right, there you go, everybody. Today we have with us Albert Bramante. Welcome to our show, Albert. So happy to have you on our podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Absolutely. Why don't we get right into the topic? First of all, congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
And second, tell me, what made you who you are today?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. I'm glad you asked. So what really made me here is I came from a very complex background. So I was the different one in my family. And when I say different, I grew up in a family of blue-collar athletes. And my older brothers were athletes. I had cousins that were athletes. My father was. And, an athletic coach. So me being a boy, I think they figured, well, hey, let me get him into sports. And I had zero interest and zero skill in athletics. And, they were trying to suit me up in football gear or put a baseball glove and bat in my hand. And I had zero ability. I didn't want to do it. I didn't like it. Even to this day, I'm not into sports.
Right.
I don't knock it. I'm just not interested in it. So I became very interested in behind the scenes. I think I told my father when I was like 6, because he was kind of like, why don't you want to do this? And I told him, I said, I don't want to play. I want to own the team. And so that kind of ended that whole conversation there about them trying to get me into sports. But they were trying to toughen me up, which I understand, like in the old school generation. But I started finding my solace into books, and that became my haven. And that became my atmosphere. My sanctuary was the library. And you would find me on Saturdays in the library. And I love to read. I still love to read now. I have a very robust bookshelf. So I love to read. And I think my love of books started at that time. So I became very interested in human behavior, human relationships, human behavior, psychology, because of the books I was reading. And so I decided I want to major in psychology. And I also had a creativity side to me. I enjoyed being around creative people. There's an energy about it. And so that kind of led me down a rabbit hole of working with actors as well as the performers as a talent agent, which is what I primarily do now in New York City. So that's my primary, occupation. But I also have a doctorate degree in psychology, and I wrote a book, and that book is due to self-sabotage in performing arts.
Wonderful. That's amazing. PhD in psychology, talent agent, and an author. And I've seen your profile, Albert. It's impressive. So I'm curious to know, how did you manage everything?
The key is to kind of find find a method that combines everything.
Right.
And so for my doctoral dissertation, which is for those of you who may not be familiar with it, it's a huge thesis that we have to complete to earn a PhD. So we had to solve like a real world problem or a real world question. And incidentally, I was just starting my PhD when I was just starting my company, my talent agency company. And I was noticing a lot of actors were self-sabotaging. And so that led me down the rabbit hole for my doctoral dissertation was to kind of figure out what's going on with actors and self-sabotage.
Got it. Okay, interesting. So let's talk about that a little bit. You talk a lot about the imposter syndrome, right? What can one do to first identify that? And second, how can they overcome it?
So with imposter syndrome, the first thing is to recognize that it's a part of everyone faces it to some level. So it could just mean when you start doubting yourself, like maybe putting yourself down in the sense where it's like, I what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I'm not cut out for this.
Right.
And it's a natural state where am I doing the right thing? And what I found with my work is a lot of high achievers even fall into this category. Peak performers, high achievers. So it's not just a state that some people experience, through all faces from time to time. Now, I like to look at it like imposter syndrome as being your friend, as being an ally, because
Okay.
that keeps you in check. That keeps your behavior in check.
Okay. How so?
Well, it keeps you humble in a sense. So rather than developing an inflated ego, it keeps you humble. So if there's something that I'm feeling weak in or not strong in, I can then work to improve that, whether through coaching, through learning, through reading. So I've always maintained the mentality that we always need to learn
Right.
and that we're always learning or always evolving.
Correct. Yeah. I feel that irrespective of age, background, I think everybody needs to have that mentality where, they should learn something new every day, or at least strive to learn something every month, even if it's not every day and you're just busy with your chores. I think that's what keeps you alive. That's what keeps you curious and to know what's going on in the world and how you can, you know, understand what's going around what's going on around you and your surroundings. Yeah, I think that's very important. Let's talk about self doubt for a little bit because I feel like we are in a generation that is super lonely. And second, based off of social media, there are youngsters and so many kids these days, and even young adults I see who have this like major self doubt. I did not have that growing up, even though I was born and raised in a very normal middle class family. What would be that one piece of suggestion that you would give to people to overcome self doubt?
Well, first of all, to recognize what's happening. I mean, that's adversity. And it's okay to have self doubt. I mean, that's what makes us human. And so we're not perfect. So
Yeah.
the one thing I would say is always lean into your achievements. So what have you achieved? Like, in my case, I wrote a book, you're going to wrote a book. And, even, whether it's making a large move to another country, that's an amazing stuff that a lot of people need to recognize and celebrate. Like, not only did you move, but you're surviving and thriving here in that. So I would celebrate those achievements. That would be the first thing I would do is like, okay, we need to celebrate that achievement.
Mm,
And that's important.
correct.
So,
Agreed. Okay. Celebrate small achievements. It's interesting that you say that because I had another guest on the show and she is the owner of this place called Art as Therapy. And she calls herself an art therapist. And so she said the exact same thing. She said, when people come to her, when adults come to her and they're overwhelmed with so much self doubt and so many other things that are going on, and they question their worth, the first thing that she asks them to do is to list out everything they're doing now at present. And then she makes them realize that, hey, look at this. You've already done so much and you're already doing so much. And that in itself is a big deal. Yeah, so that's on point there. Thank you so much. Yeah, Albert, I'm curious to know, all of us are different, correct? And then I'm so intrigued to know how the human psyche and what role it plays in terms of personality, background, and then actual performance. How can one be? I know you are focused on actors and artists and people who perform, who are creatives, and who have a lot of creativity in them, talent in them. How do you feel background and personality and who you are as a person plays a role in what you do as an artist?
Well, it really is a big part of your identity, and that's what you're describing is someone's identity, and it's a part of us, and how a lot of times our what it all boils down to what was in psyche and all that comes to our identity. How do we define it? How do we identify ourselves? How we describe ourselves? So what I would say is like not only are you struggling, I would say get out of that struggling mindset, but I would also say adopt a thriving mindset. So like in my context with artists and actors, for some reason the starving artist archetype has been romanticized.
Yeah.
And I don't see a point in that. So that if you come with with the identity or you embody the identity of the starving artist, what's going to happen is you're going to be sabotaging for other opportunities. And a lot of people play small, unfortunately. It's like they downplay their achievements.
Right. Yes.
And they appear small and take small-minded actions, and that is a form of self-sabotage.
Yes. Self-deprecation. Exactly. That was one of my first few episodes of the podcast when I had just begun. And I was so intrigued by that topic because I see so many people doing it. And I sometimes still do it till date, where I will put myself down and, I will show myself like, oh yeah, this is nothing, even you could have done it. So yeah, I agree. That is great. What about self-esteem, Bert? You talk about a difference between toxic self esteem and the good kind of self esteem. What's the difference?
It really, in a very simple answer, humility, being humble. That would be the biggest thing. Now, self-esteem really is, and this has been written about for decades, and it's probably one of the most hot topics ever written. There's thousands, under tens of thousands of books and articles about self-esteem, and that's important. So our self-esteem is very important. However, what I've noticed is if you have low self-esteem, you tend to not really set yourself apart that way. In a sense, so you put yourself down. Now, with healthy self-esteem, you celebrate your achievements, your wins, and you feel you're deserving. Now, with toxic high self-esteem is when you take it to the point where you're better than everybody else, and you walk around with a bit of arrogance or just being pompous or arrogant, where you believe that you're better than everybody else. Why that is important, especially in the context of self-sabotage, is you're not open to feedback. You're not open to coaching. So when somebody tells you something that might be helpful feedback or constructive criticism, you start to dismiss them as like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about, or these people get really insulted.
Right. Right.
And so it's a saboteur. It's acting as a saboteur because you're not putting yourself out there enough,
Right.
and you're not being coachable, and so you're missing out on key areas of growth. And so this relates to actors all the time because it's like sometimes I'll run into an actor and I'll talk to them and they'll have the mentality where I don't need any training. I have all the training I need. I'm perfect. Just book me. And I'm like, that to me is very limiting because when they get feedback from a director or from a casting director or anything, and that nature, they get highly insulted by that.
Right. Right. So how can one, start being open to feedback like that? Because I see it even in the IT industry or whichever industry for that matter. If your leader is talking to you and, if you've given a feedback, how can you take it as, how can you not be offended by it?
Well, take the whole thing is that as everything is feedback. So feedback helps us grow. And there's no such thing as a perfect individual. We're always a work in progress. And even as a person in a leadership role, a good leader listens to the feedback of the people that are, even if they're leading or that they're serving. So they maybe, yeah, at the end of the day, the buck stops with them, but they're also listening and considering the opinions of other people
Right.
and open to that feedback. So the one thing is not to take it personally. That's the biggest thing. And it's hard to do that. It's easier said than done, not to take it personally. But that's what really it's all about, is not taking it personally. Okay. What is about the approach? Let me strip it down, and what's the approach? Because very often if we're in a fragile state, we'll start thinking, well, they didn't like me. They didn't like it. That they're not happy with me.
Yeah.
And that's not the truth at all. It's just, here's something that you need to improve on. And it's only an opinion. Now you could take, again, you could take it and leave it, depending on, the situation.
Correct.
But the important thing is not to be insulted, not to get insulted by it. At the same time, I wouldn't allow someone to be rude or inappropriate or abrasive towards you. That obviously has no place in leadership. But
Yeah.
if somebody is giving you feedback, take it as a tool to help you, and take what you can from that. So, because a lot of times we get really sensitive, and some people they have tact when they get feedback, and some people are not tactful. They can sometimes be abrasive. But sometimes what it really boils down to, sometimes it's not what they said, but how they said it. And if you can separate that, say, forget about how they said it. Maybe they said it in a wrong or inappropriate message. Well, what message was there? Because a lot of times you'll find that even the most abrasive remark could have had, in a different context, some truth to it. Okay. Because even people who harshly criticized me, growing, when I got really insulted, but then I take a step back. I'm like, well, they weren't entirely wrong with this aspect or that aspect. Okay, maybe they didn't say it the most best way possible. They could have used help with their messaging, but so take it, and everything is feedback. So one of the things I often say, there's no such thing as failure, only feedback.
Right. That's happened with me so many times. My sister and my mother, whenever I give them any suggestion or advice, they hate the way I say it. They'll come back, like they'll get irritated when I say it, but then after a week, they'll come back and they'll be like, oh, it's not what you said, that made perfect sense. And it's valuable to us if we implement your suggestion, but it was how you said it. And it'll take them like a week or 2 weeks or a month to realize that.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. But you're right. Like the minute you get past that, just forget the fact of how they said it and just focus on if that was really good feedback, constructive feedback, then it's going to be very helpful for you as a person,
Yeah.
for your growth in your career, in your life, relationships, everything. This is great. This is great. Okay. So, Albert, a personal question. When you were writing this book and your dissertation, everything, when you're working on it, and now you've helped so many artists and you've gotten them a lot of gigs, what's the most interesting part, or which job did you enjoy the most, and what fueled you?
What fueled me was the actual, getting it done. I've always wanted to be a doctor, have the doctor title. I'm not gonna lie, I had my moments. I had a lot of moments, actually. I'm not gonna, lie there and tell you that it was all, smooth sailing. It wasn't.
Right.
But I think what really helped me, especially was taking action. And I didn't want to have the identity of the person who has all their coursework done and not their dissertation. Because there's a title now, it's not really accepted, but a lot of people have the title ABD, which is all but dissertation. I didn't want that. And for me, I was like, I worked so hard to get here. Now, the dissertation is a It's a very tedious process, more so than I ever thought it was. I was great at writing papers, but this is something 100 times beyond writing a course paper. So that I think was really a bit taxing on me. But the important thing is getting it done and having that honor. Because when I was walking across the stage, getting robed as a PhD, that was the best feeling I would say ever. And it was just an achievement thing. And the same thing with writing a book. For years after, because there was a large gap between the when I had my dissertation and I wrote my book now. My dissertation laid the groundwork and the foundation for my book. So when I was thinking about writing a book, I was the type of person that everyone I would talk to is, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book someday. I'm going to write a book someday. For me, I had to get the word someday out of that, because if I kept saying someday, I'd probably be sitting here in 2025 saying, I'm going to write a book someday.
Yeah.
So the important thing is taking action. And the best feeling in the world was actually holding the paperback in my hand with my name on it. And because I love books, I'm like, I wrote one. Here's the one with my name on it. And it's now I'm excited to write more, and that's the whole thing. It's one of the best feelings in the world is actually hold your book in your hand.
I completely agree. That's one thing I can totally relate with. I still remember the day when I opened up the package and I held that paperback in my hand, had my name on it, and I was just squealing with joy like a small child. Yeah, it just, the cherry on top was last year, or I think it was in February this year. I actually received the news that my book is in the library in the University of Michigan. And I was so elated. That feeling, nothing can beat
That's
that.
great.
It is awesome. I agree. Taking action is so important, and that I'm going to take a note of it for myself too, because I'm doing the same thing with my second book where I'm saying, I'm writing it. I finished 20,000 words. I have a lot more left and I still have to finish it. But I keep saying people, I'm writing it. So I actually need to sit down and actually finish it. This has been interesting, Albert. Thank you so much for all your suggestions. Do you have any last tips, thoughts, or advice for our listeners?
Well, I would say the biggest thing is to take action and do something that makes you uncomfortable, even a little bit. And for me, that was, putting the book out there, being an author. It's an identity change, now, and a new identity. It could be a bit scary initially, or at least a bit terrifying. And I think sometimes if you do things that are a bit scary, it's a strap that'll actually improve you. So dare to do something that's a little scary.
Perfect. And on that note, I thank you so much, Albert, for being a guest on our show. Thank you for taking out your time from your busy schedule. Yeah, of course. This is great. Learned a lot. Definitely going to take action and definitely stepping out of the comfort zone now. Thank you so much, Albert.
Thank you.
I hope you learned a thing or two from this podcast episode. You know what you got to do. Share this with someone, spread the joy and spread the knowledge. As always, keep growing, keep glowing, and be yourself. This is your host, Sheekha Singh, signing off. And there's a lot more interesting stuff coming for you every week. See ya.